Alrighty, so today we are sitting down to plug another movie into the one-shot system. So today the movie that I watched was The Equalizer 2. So I finally gotten around to watching both those movies prior to scheduling whenever I'm going to see the third movie sometime either this week or this weekend before it comes out of theaters. Um, yeah, I mean, just to get started again with kind of trying to keep the theme of talking about Blu-ray features or something like that just when I come across them. I would say that the way I actually watched this movie, I didn't get the chance to watch it all in one sitting just because of stuff with life. So I ended up watching about half of it yesterday in the evening, and then another half of it today during the day during an off period. And I was pleasantly surprised that even though my PS5 had shut off, like everything had died and come back on, the second that I booted back into the movie, now granted, I didn't like try to play a game in between or something like that. I don't know if that would mess with things, but I booted right back into the movie and it actually remembered the spot that I was at within the movie before shutting down. So I think that was pretty convenient. That was pretty cool. I did not realize that they could do that today. I don't know if that's a super normal feature for Blu-rays. It's been out forever. I'm just kind of getting started into watching all these different things that I've collected. But that being said, I was pleasantly surprised that that was the case. And so we were able to finish it no problem from the exact point we left off. So getting into the Equalizer 2, assuming that you've either watched The Equalizer before or you've seen my previous review, you're pretty much caught up on the lore as far as, this movie series is about Denzel Washington as this sort of John Wick meets Batman meets Jason Bourne sort of guy. And he is a retired assassin for the military, and, they had a fake funeral for him, and now he's trying to live his life as this new person, but actually he is this vigilante on the side that receives, requests from people for help, and then he'll go and try to solve the problem for them. And then if he sees anything in his life, like similar to a scene that happened at the beginning of this movie that needs some sort of, wrong rightening, then he'll step in and make sure that happens. So it's a very cool series in general. That's kind of the vibe. But what is this one exactly about? Basically, we start off and now instead of him working at Home Depot, which probably was going to be an issue, and living in the same apartment that he was before, he now, I don't know if he lives in like a different place in Boston or if he lives in a different place entirely. But I think he still lives in Boston though. But he now lives in this new apartment where he's got different neighbors that all know him kind of by name. And then instead of being a Home Depot guy, he drives for Lyft, which is just kind of funny to think that, you could meet up with this Lyft driver that also murders people on the side for good. But anyway, the main plot around this movie centers around, in the beginning, you see this guy get basically ambushed by assassins at his house, and they kill his wife and him. And then, I don't know if they kill his kid, but they said his kid was on the way. But then, as the FBI goes to investigate this murder, the friend from the first movie, who, by the way, I didn't get to mention this in my review of the first movie, but I thought it was pretty clever that the way that they sort of escape, him getting in trouble for blatantly doing all these sort of things, he has this deep state FBI connection in the form of this old friend lady who is able to sort of smooth things over for him, it seems like, or get him access to information that he needs to be able to put two and two together. So I think that's a pretty clever way to sort of write in that plot armor instead of just being like, well, he doesn't get in trouble. But at the same time, I guess now what happens is she's murdered after she goes to investigate this crime. So maybe that protection no longer exists for him. I don't know. But that's sort of the setup for this movie. So now he's got to get vengeance or some sort of justice to be served for the people that caused this to happen and stop them from doing it in the future, I guess. I was hesitant to do spoilers on the first movie, but I might do spoilers for this one just to kind of be able to talk through the things that I like about it, and the things that I don't like. So I guess maybe expect light spoilers from this point forward. But the movie plays out as any of these sort of movies would normally play out. So the parts of the movie that you'd be interested in, I think that I'm not going to spoil and will still be there for you, even if you kind of know what's going to happen in the plot. So basically, there's some side stories. There's one in the beginning where he's driving for Lyft, and it seems like this woman just got sexually assaulted when she gets in the car. And so he goes and sort of rights that wrong. And I just want to say, like, nothing in film is more uncomfortable to watch, even though obviously it happens in real life and there needs to be some sort of attention drawn to how heinous and nasty things like this can be. It's just like, wow. Every single time I see any movie that has some sort of rape or sexual assault insinuation involved, it's just like the grossest feeling you could ever feel, which I guess is the point. But, you know, it's just rough every time I see it, is I guess what I'm saying. But he goes up and, you know, we get this cool scene where he goes and he kind of he doesn't right the wrong, but he goes and gets justice for this girl by going up and taking care of these rich assholes that did that to her. And dude, that kind of gets into one of the things I like about these movies in general, is that the stunt choreography and how he deals with his enemies is top notch. Like, there's this rich dude that he four pieces into a freaking wall, and I don't even think that, you know, close-ups in video games and QuickTime events rival, you know, some of the shots we got with that. So I think that's one thing I can definitely say about this series in general that's awesome. And then this movie does a good job of playing into those scenes a lot. I felt like they did less of that, like Sherlock Holmes, he's doing an ocular pat down to figure out what to do. But he still remained very sharp and quick and stuff like that. And all the scenes were pretty cool. So that's one storyline that kind of gets resolved. Another one is he's helping this old man on a daily basis drive to and from maybe appointments at the courthouse or something like that. And he's this Jewish guy that, you know, got separated during World War II from his sister, and he believes that this famous painting that's worth $12 million that some guy owns in an art gallery is actually a portrait of his sister, and that he would like to, you know, get access to this portrait because if his sister is dead, then this is a memory and this is actually their family's heirloom, and it's not anything for somebody to sell, even if it is now worth so much money because of its connection to the Holocaust. And this is one thing about whoever is the writer on this movie, is that certain concepts or certain things in real life they just kind of brush over or they're pretty harsh about. I don't know if it's because they think that's how the world is, or if that's just like how they're trying to portray the situation being bleak for the guy. But like, imagine you're this old guy trying to get this painting back, and you've got this other guy that's kind of helping you out and talking to you every day, and then your handler at your nursing home goes to talk to that guy, and he's like, yeah, well, he a couple of years ago he said that painting was his, and he said he had proof every time, but he never really has proof. Meanwhile, like 30 seconds before this in the movie, the guy shows that he has proof, at least to some extent, that the portrait is his and his family's. And, then the nurse guy is like, well, you know how it is once you get old, you basically have no brain. It's like, damn, dude, I hope that when I'm older, people don't treat me like that, because even though, there's probably a high chance that I'll have Alzheimer's or something like that based on my family, it's just like, the idea that as an old person, all of a sudden you lose all, benefit of the doubt or dignity in what you're saying is just annoying to me. But that was just a funny thing, I guess. But as the plot in this movie, so that's kind of the other side story. As the plot of this movie progresses, you find out that, he's starting to get to know his community a little bit more. There are gang members in his community that have torn up this girl's garden and then spray painted all the walls and stuff like that. And this served as a great opportunity for them to play off of another big theme in the movie, which is sort of, which I enjoyed a lot. Recently, I've been getting into reading some light philosophy and stuff like that. I've become one of these like meditations bro type of people after reading meditations. But I like how they constantly set him up to sort of teach this lesson to other people in the story. And in this movie particularly, they hone in on this lesson a lot. And it's just that, there is a right and wrong in the world where, doing things based on rational thought is the right way to go. And trying to be a good person to other people is also based in kind of the right way to go. And so you start out by seeing this by, after the people spray paint all the walls around the building, Denzel Washington's character is, trying to clean it up off the walls. And this other character, Miles, who Denzel mentors for the rest of the movie, comes up and he's like, well, you pay rent and stuff, like the building's supposed to handle that. And Denzel's like, well, as we know, a lot of people are supposed to do a lot of things, but rarely do they ever do them. And I know that it needs to be done, and I'm capable of doing it. So here I am doing it, right? And I think that is something I wish more people would take hold of in their own life, I guess. But it's a cool lesson to teach, and it helps build throughout the movie as you kind of see that that's sort of how he feels about himself, where he has the ability to help people out in this way that nobody else can. And so it's almost because of that his obligation to do so, right? And then later on in the movie, as this plot starts to unravel, we start to find out that maybe that people, and this is sort of a spoiler, so if you don't want to know this at all, I would say skip forward like 45 seconds or something like that. But there is this concept in meditations of, if you are doing the wrong thing, the next best thing you can do is the right thing, right? It is foolish to keep doing the wrong thing because you're going to continue down this path into somewhere where you don't want to go. But also to dwell on the fact that you've done all these wrong things is kind of pointless because that gets in the way of you bettering yourself to do the right thing. And so it's like this aspect of return to rationality, but in my mind, there's also this layer of return to morality where, if you have done all these bad things, it's not going to help the world for you to continue to do these bad things in the name of like, oh, well, I'm already screwed, right? And so one of the main adversary in this movie is a group of assassins, right? The person who killed who we later find out was an FBI informant, and the person who killed the FBI agent herself, that's his friend. It's a group of people that all used to be a part of this same type of assassin network that the government had, that Denzel Washington was a part of, right? And the explanation that Pedro Pascal's character gives for the reasoning behind turning to the dark side, essentially, is that, there is no good and bad. There are people that do things, and I am doing this thing because it puts money on the table, and it's just people's name on a piece of paper, and there's a money dollar sign attached to it, and that's just what I do. And there's nothing morally bad about that because there's also nothing morally good. And people just do things, so why shouldn't I advocate for myself? This is inherently flawed because, this is in that same idea of, yeah, well, if you do the wrong thing, to keep doing the wrong thing will never get you a positive outcome, right? And that's why you see he's still, eventually, if you understand how these movies go, he's going to get his comeuppance. But it's like, you see that he is not at peace with this situation either. Like his life, even though he's got his wife and his kids, he's still out here doing all these things that he wished he wasn't doing. So it doesn't make sense. His logic is flawed. And at least you could say, if Denzel Washington is doing the same thing, if you're to say, killing somebody in general is a bad thing and Denzel is just murdering all these people, at least he is serving justice to those that deserve it, right? And he's restoring balance almost to the order of things by allowing for justice to prevail. So it's just that I really like that the movie played into that philosophical aspect, because that's something that I've currently been very obsessed with in my own life, just sort of understanding the nature of things and how, even though it may feel like we live in this world full of existential dread and hopelessness, the idea that in reality, the path forward is always to be a good person and be nice to your neighbor and stuff like that. And that ultimately, if you find that you have been a dick, or you have been an assassin, or you have been any of these things, like tomorrow or even right in this moment is the best time for you to change that attitude. And if you don't, you could end up like Pedro Pascal's character, who's stuck in this infinite doom loop of murdering people for hire and being unhappy with it. And then eventually, you know, the Grim Reaper comes to get you when all these bad choices, you know, stack up against you karmatically, if that makes sense. So I really like that is like Denzel Washington's character, Robert McCall's philosophy on life. I think that's a cool thing for a guy like this to have as sort of his viewpoint, because in many of these movies, it's like good guy versus bad guy. Bad guys are bad guys, right? In this movie, they try to instill the false idea of, you know, they're not bad guys, everybody's complicated, this and that and the other thing. But in reality, it's like, you know, when you kill somebody for nothing other than money, and they are people that are actively trying to do good things in the world, so you know you've been hired by the bad people to do it, if you get what I'm saying. And don't, you know, people be like, oh, well, then what defines good and bad in that? It's like, you know, obviously the people that are warlords in some country that are trying to be discovered by the US so that they can save all these people are worse than the FBI agents that are, you know, but I'm not even going to get into that. But just like, he knows that he's doing the wrong thing, Pedro Pascal's character. And to continue to do so only leads him further down this hole that eventually leads to his demise, right? So I just like that whole aspect of the exploration of that theme, because I've been thinking about it a lot. But as this movie goes on, you know, I would just say that, to not spoil any of some of the subtle character notes and kind of the stuff that happens, it has a similar plot development of the first movie, and it ends up in a huge fight at the end. And this is where I think I missed the opportunity to kind of talk about this in my review of the first movie as well. And I want to talk about it here. I really like, while I think that these movies are not profound in general, I really like what they've done with the character as far as how he approaches these situations. Because like I said before, he really is a mix of Batman and John Wick and maybe Jason Bourne a little bit, in the way of, you know, the style that he uses to take care of everybody is very similar to the gameplay style of, you know, if you're playing Arkham Knight or Arkham City, and you're up in the rafters watching everybody, how they move, and then you're setting up yourself to trap them and go and grab them while nobody else is looking and hang them up and stuff like that. This is like exactly how he takes care of people, except in Batman's case, he never kills anybody, but in Robert McCall's case, he just straight glocks everybody that comes in his path, right? And another thing that I like about this movie series is that they always find a way to include some sort of unique weapon. And so in the first movie, it was like the bad guy being, you know, killed by the nail gun. I'm pretty sure it was like a ram set, which is kind of funny too. But basically, like, you know, that was an interesting way for the guy to get taken down. But then in this movie, the first of the bad guys gets glocked by a freaking harpoon, right? And they, even over the radio, the bad guys are just like, oh my God, he's gone. You know, I kind of like that a lot. And then in this movie, they also used a flower bomb, which was something that I only recently became aware of. And when I saw it kind of setting up for that, it's like, oh, no way they're going to do that. So I kind of like that. That's kind of fun. Any action movie that uses unique sort of kill cams That's kind of fun. But I'll just say the movie wraps up in the exact way that you kind of expect it would. And Robert's character does have somewhat of a, I mean Denzel's character Robert has somewhat of a growth, even if it's subtle. Because in the first movie, there was this whole aspect of like, you need to return to the beach because your wife would want you to stop doing this kind of stuff. Like, what about your wife, whatever. And it seemed like he didn't really want to talk about that other than to say, you know, reminisce on nice things that had happened between them in the past. But in this movie, the last battle takes place at his beach house. And there is this scene where you can kind of sense that he's come to terms with the death of his wife and he's finished the books that he's supposed to read and all that kind of stuff. And even though he's not done being the Equalizer, it's like that chapter in a sense has closed. And on top of that, I think there was a really cool scene at the end where the same character that's an artist that he's sort of mentoring over the movie, he's like, I have this superhero in mind and he has magic locks and drives in Malibu and stuff like that. I don't know. I thought that was cool. But the movie wraps up well. The Jewish guy, I'm just going to spoil this because it's just such a small part of the movie. But like, this is one thing I don't think connected well. It's like the whole movie they focused on this painting, but really he missed his sister. But then we don't hear anything about what happened with the painting, but apparently they found his sister and she's not dead, and that's how that's resolved as he meets her. And in general, I think that was the best outcome because that's what he wanted out of getting the painting. But at the same time, if this is a $12 million painting that is really owned by their family that was stolen from them and is now being sold at auction, it's like, dude, he didn't really get full justice out of this. Like, yeah, he got his sister, which many would say was the point, is more important. But dude, $12 million, $12 million, especially for somebody on fixed income. But that's just, that's an aside. But yeah, that's a movie. It ends how you would expect. I think it was a good movie. I had a lot to talk about today. But I will say, plugging it in now to the score system, this movie didn't really do much to reinvent what happened in the first movie other than adding a little bit more sort of spice to it. And maybe some might say that because you already knew the kind of person that he was, that this storyline about following the FBI agents and them being actually bad, but we didn't really know that he worked with all those people until they said that he did. I feel like that was all a little bit underwhelming. So with this, I would say definitely see the movie. I think it's on Hulu, so if you got Hulu and you can watch it on streaming, it makes perfect sense to see the movie. But I don't think that this is one that you necessarily need to see right this second. I would say maybe see the first one and see what you think before you see this one. And if I'm going to rate this movie, I think that if I said the last one was like a weak 4, a low 4 sort of situation, I would say this one is a strong 3, which the way my system's working in my head is that a strong 3 is maybe somewhere like a 3.8-ish on the spectrum. But don't take those numbers, like we're sticking to the system. But, so I think it's close to a 4, but it just doesn't quite cross the barrier. I think it has nothing to do with, Denzel Washington's performance. I think he did a good job playing this type of guy that he's very good at playing. But I just think that overall, the sum of its parts didn't, the movie as a whole wasn't greater than the sum of its parts. And so with that being said, I would watch the movie. I would catch it on streaming if you can. If you really liked the first movie after watching it, then you already know what you're getting into. And I would say do not hesitate to watch this movie. You're not going to be disappointed. But it's not something that you need to see immediately. And it's a strong 3. So there you go. That's the review. If you're watching this, feel free to let me know what you think either about the review or the movie itself in the comments. If you disagree with me, that's awesome, and let me know why. If you agree with me, that's awesome. Let me know why. This is the end of the review, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.